Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Racing Form Breeders' Cup webinar. I am Brad Free and happy to be joined by handicapping colleague, author, horse player, Andy Beyer, the creator of Beyer Speed Figures that are found exclusively in Daily Racing Form. Andy, looking forward to talking about the 14 Breeders' Cup races that we'll be seeing this weekend at Santa Anita. Before we dive in, and we're going to go boom, boom, boom right through it. This year's Breeders' Cup, a little different. There's no real star power, and there's also been some kind of sad stories leading up to the Breeders' Cup. What about the difference between 22 and 23?
There's no big name attraction, but to me, I mean, when you've got 14 races, many of which are challenging, evenly matched. I mean, nobody's going to be bored, but it's when you've got a big star, I guess it generates always going to generate more widespread public interest.
Yeah, widespread public interest. I would be interested in the Breeders' Cup 14 race series regardless. And right. I know that Flightline was fun to watch, but his presence last year in the Classic kind of removed all potential to actually wager on the race. I don't think that's the case this year. Agree?
No, there's certainly a lot of challenging races to deal with.
There are plenty of challenging races, including 5 on Friday for 2-year-olds. So why don't we go ahead and get right to it? And by the way, Andy and I, toward the end of the segment, we'll be taking a couple of questions, a half dozen questions or so, and providing our most probable winner and best long shot. And the first Breeders' Cup race of 2023 is the Juvenile Turf Sprint. 5 furlongs on grass. A field of 12 will enter. Andy, I wish that this race was longer than 5 furlongs because I think it adds an element of luck that is not necessary. What do you think about the Juvenile Turf Sprint?
And now that Santa Anita has the capability of running 6 furlongs on the turf, I'm surprised that they don't.
Yeah, so am I. I'm very surprised. 4 of the first 5 Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprints were won by the pace setter. Last year at Keeneland, the winner came from far back. What about this year? Who do you like, Andy?
Well, there's a ton of speed in here, but it's really a wide open race. But when I'm confused, I always gravitate toward the horse with the best speed figure. And there's an interesting situation here when in turf sprints, particularly for maidens, it is really hard to make speed figures. And in a lot of cases, it's so impossible that we just leave them blank. In the case of Crimson Advocate, when he won at Gulfstream Park, we had no figure in the paper for quite some time, but subsequent events have kind of made that race a little clearer. And when you see that Crimson Advocate No Name Mets ran on the same day at Gulfstream, and Crimson Advocate was like 16 points faster, and now we know No Name Mets was really a legit stakes horse. We improvised a little, but gave Crimson Advocate a figure of 88, No Name Mets a 72 for that Gulfstream race. That 88 is good enough to win this race.
It's a big figure. The question for Crimson Advocate is the same question that applies to my top selection, and that's Big Evs. These are 2 front-running 2-year-olds who do their stuff on the lead. Andy, you and I could cancel each other out. You like Crimson Advocate. I like Big Eves, whose replays from Europe. This horse is as quick from the gate as any horse I've ever seen.
Well, Crimson Advocate got to the lead in a field of 26 at Royal Ascot, so he's no slouch either.
That's a good point. Whoever makes the lead is going to be probably tough to catch in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint. It's race 5 on Friday, race 6 on Friday, a traditional race. 2-year-old fillies going 1 mile and 1/16, and one of the shortest price favorites of the entire Breeders' Cup, Tamara, based on her win in the Del Mar Debutante. Andy, she has the highest speed figure in the field. Is it as easy as just identifying the number and deciding whether or not you want to bet?
Yeah, I think she's a clear-cut favorite, a probable winner. I wouldn't go against her. You're the Californian here. What was your impression of her?
Well, here's the thing. I wouldn't go against her either, but I'm not so sure that I want to dive in at odds of 4-5. And a lot of that opinion is based on what Daily Race Informed clocker Mike Welsh has seen from Tamara over the last couple of weeks or so. And I'm going to read exactly what Welsh wrote regarding her most recent workout. Tamara on October 28th seemed to tire a bit under late urging before looking just average on the gallop out. Mike Welsh does not like what he's seen from Tamara, nor have other clockers who know what they're looking at in the morning. So my enthusiasm for Tamara is a little tempered. I don't know that it makes any difference, but and I still think she's the most likely winner. I'm not convinced that she is as good now as she was immediately after the Del Mar debutante.
I always pay attention to what Mike Welsh says, in his rundowns of the field for both, the whole Friday and Saturday card. So that's might make you hold onto your wallet a little tighter.
I don't think that's a bad idea. Sometimes the best bet is no bet at all. And even as we watched Tamara winning the Del Mar debutante, and she won in a landslide, and we all know about her pedigree. This is an impressive win in only the second start of her career, Tamara. She won for fun. She earned a 91 Beyer speed figure. If she repeats that, this race is over. I don't mind taking a short price occasionally in a rolling bet, only if everything's perfect. I'm not sure everything is perfect with regards to Tamara. Angie and I both picked her on top. We recognize she's the horse to beat. I don't know that 4-5 is the right price to take on Tamara. Race number 7 on Friday. We stick with the 2-year-old fillies again. This one is at a mile on turf, and this is a race that Europeans have historically not done all that well in, but that changed last year with Meditate. Andy, I think you picked her on top last year. What about this year for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf? Are you going back to Europe to find the winner?
I am. I mean, when I try to assess European horses, I go to the Racing Post's website, which lets you look up the records of all the horses who were in a field, and you can do some basic classifying and see who's beaten whom and who's run against the best fields. And I think I give Carla's Way the edge in here. When she won that Rockefeller Stakes at Newmarket last time, the horses who finished second and third behind her came back to run 1-2 in a Group 1 stakes, the Fillies Mile. I was probably as good a field as you would find over there. I didn't see any of the U.S. horses with who had credentials that would stack up with that. So although my record in guessing at Europeans is not exemplary, I think Carla's Way is the one.
Well, you're on a 1-year winning streak with regards to the Juvenile Fillies Turf, because I know you picked the winner of this race last year with a European. I'm going to Canada to find the winner, I think. Anyway, her name is She Feels Pretty. She's actually based in Kentucky. She went up to Canada to win the Natalma by more than 4 lengths. Who did she beat in her win? Only 5 next out winners. How do we know that? You can look it up on Formulator. That's one of the benefits of Daily Race Inform's Formulator program. You can take a look at the form of the field that a horse beat or ran against. And in the case of She Feels Pretty, 5 next out winners. So Andy and I are kind of thinking along the same lines. He likes Carla's Way because of who she defeated last time out. I like She Feels Pretty for many of the same reasons. And her win was decisive in the Natalma. So Andy goes with Carla's Way. I go with She Feels Pretty. And we are on to another traditional Breeders' Cup race. 2-year-olds running a mile and 1/16. A Japanese horse that I was interested in to maybe hit the board is out. That's number 5, Ekuro Neo. Andy, a mile and 1/16 on the main track. Are there any future stars in this field?
Certainly could be. Prince of Monaco, ran a tremendous race from the figure standpoint at Santa Anita, and it looked like the budding star of the generation. I mean, when he came back in a route race, his figure was not nearly as impressive. And although he won, I thought he was it wasn't like he was under triple wraps. He was being asked reasonably much. I'd be interested in your opinion, but since that's your home base, I was visually more impressed by Locht, who was parked out 4 wide around both turns, going a distance. I mean, he can, he can handle 2 turns, and his figures are respectable. So I give Locht the edge. But if Prince of Monaco wins, we may have a new real star on our hands.
Well, it looked like we had a real star when he popped with a 103 Beyer in the second start of his career. Andy, I've looked back over the years at 2-year-olds who were in triple-digit figures, and almost without exception, they generally back up in their very next start. Now, they can back up and win, which is exactly what Prince of Monaco did. But I want a horse going into the Breeders' Cup on an upward cycle, and I'm not sure. Maybe that 103 by Prince of Monaco was just a one-off, because when he went 7 furlongs in the Del Mar Futurity, yeah, he won the race. You're right. It was not that impressive. I think that Baffert might control this race. He has 3 in the field: Prince of Monaco, Wind Me Up, and Muth. And I like the way that Muth is coming into this race. I know he got drilled by Prince of Monaco 2 starts back, but Muth went forward in his next start, whereas Prince of Monaco went backward. And Muth in the American Pharaoh, he took dirt racing inside. He stretched out to 2 turns, and he won kind of convincingly. I say that Baffert holds the key to this race because all 3 of his horses have speed. They're not going to go head and head. One of them is going to make the lead. The other 2 will run interference. I can actually see Baffert running 1, 2, 3 all the way around. I picked Muth on top. And you're right about Locht. You talk about a wide trip. That was an impressive win. And 2-year-olds from out of town can come into California and win Breeders' Cup juveniles and juvenile fillies. We've seen it happen a number of times. Essential Quality pops into mind right off the bat.
I did, Brad. I disagree with you on one point. I mean, yeah. I don't think that necessarily Muth was moving forward last time. His speed figures was about the same, and he had a pretty easy rail trip. So I don't know if I kind of read an improving arc in his PPs.
Okay, that's a point well taken. I respectfully disagree. I know that the figure, it dropped 2 points. To me, sometimes I think you have to go with what you saw. I saw an improving colt stretch out and win clear. Anyway, Andy likes Locht. I like Muth, and we're on to another grass race. 2-year-olds going a mile on grass in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. Now, this is a race that is historically dominated by Europeans. And Andy, why don't you go ahead and take a quick peek at the Juvenile Turf?
This is actually not as strong a race as I would have anticipated with all these Europeans coming over. But I think that River Tiber looks like the class of the field. I mean, the Middle Park Stakes, where he ran 3rd last time, was one of the real definitive 2-year-old races in England, kind of on the same sort of status I think that the Champagne Stakes would have in the U.S. and he finished behind a well-regarded horse named Van Deeks. I mean, all of his 5 races have been good. I can't knock him.
Well, trainer Aidan O'Brien has started 21 horses in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. 5 wins, 5 seconds, All 5 winners were ridden by Ryan Moore. It looks like Ryan Moore had his choice between River Tiber and Unquestionable. I'm not going to question Aidan O'Brien. He's here with a horse who has never gone around a turn before. I don't think it matters. European 2-year-old grass horses typically, generally speaking, do hold an advantage over the Americans. Am I right about that, Andy?
The Europe, historically, we've always thought that the European grass horses, period, hold an edge over ours.
And they generally do. And Andy and I both agree. River Tiber, who is the 3-1 favorite on the morning line, is the horse to beat in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. And that's a wrap for the 5 races on Friday. Let's turn our attention to Saturday. 9 races on Saturday. And the first Breeders' Cup race, well, this is another horse that's going to be very heavily favored. And his name is Cody's Wish. Listen, Speed wins dirt miles in California. Speed wins going 2 turns and a mile on dirt at Santa Anita. I should be a little bit more specific. There have been 5 dirt miles run at Santa Anita, Breeders' Cup dirt miles. 4 of them were won by the pace setter. And just as a typical overall general trend, Speed does well at a mile on dirt, whether it's a 10 claimer or a Breeders' Cup dirt mile. That's my hesitation with backing Cody's Wish. Andy, you picked Cody's Wish to win the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile a year ago at Keeneland. Is it the same thing that this horse I think is best as a 1-turn closer? Is he just going to come out and win this race again because he is the best horse in the race, Cody's Wish?
He is the best horse. And initially, when I looked at your selections and saw Zozos, I said, gee, is Brad having hallucinations there? But then I noticed that he seems to be the lone speed in the race. And I know, you California boys love that. I mean, he could be the upsetter, and Brad Cox never loses. So, I mean, he's certainly a factor. I think, Cody's Wish has such good overall credentials that he's the one to beat, but I think you've identified the upsetter.
Well, not only does Cody's Wish have the credentials, he's also arguably the best looking horse at Santa Anita this week. I mean, you talk about a physical specimen. He's fantastic looking. He has a resume to back it up. The question is, can he catch a horse that's going to be loose on the lead? I think that Zozo's is long gone, especially with the defection of Practical Move, who was going to be forwardly placed. There's really no other true speed in this small field. We're not going to get 6-1 on Zozos. I can see him going 5-2 second choice. 5-2 to me is okay. I think Zozos goes gate to wire, but Andy, if the best horse wins this race, it's going to be Cody's Wish. Yeah. I think we can agree on that.
I do.
So Zozos on the lead, Cody's Wish coming from behind. It kind of seems like a 2-horse race, the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Not so, the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf. It's race number 4 on Saturday. And I think, one of the key questions in here is, can In Italian get a 1 1/4? She lost her last 2 starts against fillies and mares at shorter distances. Andy, what about I know that you didn't pick in Italian. We're going to talk about your selection in just a minute, but what about In Italian stretching out to a 1 1/4? This race does start on the downhill.
Yeah, I'm against her for that reason. She had every chance last time, loose on the lead and at a pretty sensible pace, and her got caught by her stablemate. I have to bet against her on the distance factor. I mean, I think you had mentioned the downhill start, something that might, sort of help a stamina challenged horse, make that at least the early stages a little easier. And, I did a little historical research and that's correct. I mean, in 2022, there were like 11 1/4 races under this configuration, and 4 were won by front runners, 3 by the horse who was running second and chasing the loose leader. So that may be an edge, but I don't want to take a short price on her.
Well, I agree, but I think I'm going to get your take on this. Doesn't the same challenge possibly face Inspiral, who I believe that you picked on top? She looks like a top-class miler from Europe. Why should she stay a mile and 1/4?
Well, at least we don't have evidence that to make us think that she can't. I mean, the evidence is staring us in the face, and I always assume that European horses could just go a distance when they, when they want to send them. I mean, our horses are more likely to be challenged stretching out to a mile and a quarter than the Euros are, or at least that's the way it seems to me.
Well, I'm with you with regards to an Italian potentially being vulnerable at the distance. So I want a horse who's going to be sitting second behind her, and I believe that might be a long shot by the name of Lumiere Rock. Lumiere Rock is a forwardly placed pace presser from overseas, and she actually ran very well last time out. I know she finished third in a Group 1, but she blew the break. She had to rush. She made the lead. She never really looked comfortable, and she finished third in a Group 1. She exits a race that it's the Prix de l'Opera. 3 of the last 6 Filly Mare Turf winners came out of the same race that Lumiere Rock comes out of. I'm taking a little bit of a shot. She's 12-1. I know she doesn't have the credentials of Inspiral, but the one thing we know about Lumiere Rock is she'll get the mile and 1/4. And I think that if an Italian backs up, I think Lumiere Rock gets first crack at her, and then we're going to find out if she can hold off Inspiral, who Andy picks on top.
I don't know if I see in Italian like giving it up. I mean, the horse who's chasing is going to have to do work to put pressure on her. I just thought from the class standpoint, Inspiral might have the edge in here. I mean, the filly she beat last time, that Marquise de Sevilla, probably mispronounced, was a 2-time Grade 1 winner. And the previous start at Deauville, she beat a filly named Big Rock, who at the time was like the co-top rated filly in Europe. So that's pretty good class lines, and I'll just take it on faith she can get another 1/4 of a mile.
Yeah, you brought up a good question. In Italian's not going to just give it up. Yeah, she lost her last 2 starts, but she fought back. And in the opinion of Chad Brown, and Brown is a guy that you can a trainer who you can actually talk handicapping with, and a reasonable, objective analysis. He doesn't, flower up his horses. We'll call a spade a spade. His take on In Italian's 2 recent losses. He thought she went a little quick last time, 110 for 6 furlongs. She won't need to go that fast on Saturday in the Filly Mare Turf, and 2 starts back in the Diana. I know the course was labeled firm. It had rained that day. The course was moist, and In Italian wants it hard, fast, and firm. So in Brown's eyes, in his opinion, he thinks that In Italian may have had alibis, not that you needed alibi for finishing second in a Grade 1, but she did not run to expectations. She's going to make the lead, and we'll see how far she can go. Andy likes Inspiral. I like the long shot Lumiere Rock, and we're going to turn our attention to the Filly Mare Sprint. And Andy, according to the figs, there are only 2 horses in this race who are qualified to win. One of them is the 6-5 favorite Goodnight Olive. What about the Filly Mare Sprint?
I think Goodnight Olive is a cinch. The most probable winner on the card. And did I see that you were picking Society to upset?
That is correct. Yes.
First, tell me your logic, and then I'll demolish it.
Okay, listen. First of all, it's a 2-horse race. That's clearly Goodnight Olive and Society stand out, and I was probably going to take Goodnight Olive. I don't like the rail draw, and I'm always looking for at least one legitimate reason to pick against the favorite. Society is fast. I mean, her last couple speed figures, okay, I know it was against nothing, but she won with a 106 and a 105. And Goodnight Olive, I mean, listen, what kind of trip will she work out from the rail? I don't know. I know what Society's going to do. She's going to be involved early from the outside post. Maybe she takes the lead. Maybe she sits second. She will get the jump on Goodnight Olive. Maybe Goodnight Olive wears her down, but I think Society, but I should probably admit, I have a soft spot in my heart for Society. I picked her last year in the distaff. She disappointed. I think that 7 furlongs is her trip. You picked Goodnight Olive last year in the Filly Mare Sprint. You're just going right back with what worked in 2022, right?
Well, let me just say, I hate Society.
Okay.
I thought her 2 big figure wins in her last 2 starts were both under the most ideal circumstances. For one thing, wiring a field at Charlestown is really not a hard thing to do. But on that day at Charlestown, it was a big stakes day, and there were like a half a dozen 7 furlong races on the card. And her first quarter, she got loose on the lead in slower time than an allowance race for West Virginia bred fillies. I mean, that 23.5 is just crawling. The previous start at Ellis Park was a period at Ellis that I was actually paying attention to because it was one of the biggest biases I've seen anywhere in some time. Just a gold rail speed track for a couple of weeks, and she took advantage of that bias. And before those 2 perfect trip wins, you got to go back to September 22 when she run a decent race. So I put a big X over her on my PPs.
Those are actually valid points. I don't need, she's won her last 2 starts in a landslide. Maybe she's not good enough, but she was good enough to win 7 of her 11 starts. I think that she can overcome those legitimate concerns. Andy, you like the favorite Breeders' Cup Filly Mare Sprint favorites at Santa Anita, 4 for 5. So you got some history on your side, and last year's winner in your corner. And we're going to turn the page now and go to the Breeders' Cup Mile. This is a wide open scramble. And Andy, we talked a little bit earlier about In Italian and her runner-up finish in the First Lady. Can the filly Gina Romantica come back and reproduce that 105 Beyer that she got last time out?
Well, this is from the figure standpoint, and I make those figures at Keeneland. I was just scratching my head because, Gina Romantica and In Italian ran that fast time, and there was no way you would figure that they could be faster than the Colts, who ran in a Grade 1 stakes on the same day, Master of the Seas and Up to the Mark. And yet that figure came up 5 points higher. And I looked every which way to look for an aberration. There was something about the pace, was the track changing? And I came to the conclusion this was legitimate. The only way to deal with this race figure-wise was to make the fillies 5 points faster. And I believe the 105 for Gina Romantica. Can she do it ever again in her life? I don't know. But if she's going to be double-digit odds, with the top figure, I'm going to be betting her. And as I say, I do believe that that was a strong race on her part. And In Italian was fading, but Gina really accelerated to catch her, and In Italian beat the rest of the field handily. So I give Gina Romantica credit for a good solid race. And if if it happens again, I mean, it's going to be at a big price in here.
Well, it's not too often that you can get a big number, a big price on a horse coming in with a figure as big as Gina Romanica. I remember sitting next to you at Santa Anita, Andy. It had to be 20 years ago when Cajun Beat went into the Breeders' Cup Sprint with some gaudy figure in some 3-year-old race back east. I don't have his form in front of me. And if I'm not mistaken, you went to the windows because the price was out of whack on Cajun Beat. Do you recall that instance?
I'm having trouble remembering what I had for lunch today.
You bet the horse. One reason was because he had a big number, and that's a good reason to take a big price on
Right.
Gina Romanica. I will say this. I talked to Chad Brown this week. His concern, and Andy, you kind of voiced the same thing, is could Gina Romanica bounce off that career high victory? Can she reproduce it? And I think that's a valid concern. Andy, you brought it up, and I think that Chad Brown is at least as concerned as well. I don't honestly have a strong take in this field, in this race at all. I took Songline, the mare from Japan, only because I just couldn't find anybody here to really like. Master of the Seas is hung wide in post 14, which is not necessarily a deal breaker in mild grass races at Santa Anita, but he's way out there. I don't want a short price from him. I don't know if Gina Romanica can run the same race. I don't know if 7-year-old Casa Creed can reproduce his summertime form. I took Songline. I don't have an opinion. Andy, you do have an opinion.
I don't knock that one. I mean, I'm not knocking any Japanese horses this week.
You can't, and we'll talk about that in a couple minutes. But first, let's talk about the Breeders' Cup Distaff. It's race number 7 on Saturday, and a field of 11 are entered. I don't think there's any doubt that who the horse, the favorite anyway, is, and she is none other than Idiomatic at 5-2. I guess the question for the Distaff is, by the way, Idiomatic, 4 consecutive triple-digit Beyer speed figures. But her last 2 wins, Andy, you talked about how Society had advantageous conditions winning her recent starts. You could say that something similar about Idiomatic with regards to her loose on the lead wins, grade 1 wins in her last 2 starts, right?
That is true, but you know, she seems to run her race every time, even when she doesn't make the lead. So you know, I certainly respect her, but this field is really loaded with quality speed, and you know, I think it's going to. I think she's going to have certainly going to have a lot of pressure to force her to deliver her very best.
Well, she showed 3 starts back that she can rally from behind if necessary. She stumbled at the break in the Delaware Handicap. She was able to win anyway against kind of a nondescript competition. Her last 2 starts, she got loose on the lead. So did Randomized, a 3-year-old filly who still probably has upside, but she faces a similar dilemma. She walked on the lead in her last 2 starts. I'm not so sure she is as good as those races look. I'm not sure she's as bad. What about Randomized? She's not going to get the same trip Saturday in the Distaff.
And she definitely isn't. I mean, in her 2 Saratoga wins, she was loose on the lead on a gold rail. She had a bias in her favor. Last time out, she wired a field of 4. She's not going to have a soft trip. I'm definitely against her.
Well, Adair Manor is going to be forwardly placed. You don't know what Hoosier Philly is going to do with blinkers on and the rail. She could go. The front end could be crowded, and that's going to possibly set it up for somebody from behind. Andy, is there anybody rallying from behind that catches your fancy?
Absolutely, and that's Clairiere. You know, she has been running a race after race against a really good crop of older fillies and mares. I mean, that, you know, every one of her starts is in grade 1, grade 2 company. You know, she fires almost every time. I mean, her last start at Saratoga was the first time in her life at the age of 5 that she'd ever been on a sloppy track. So I would be willing to dismiss that. But this is a good horse. She's certainly got as much talent as anybody in this field. And I think, there's a good chance she'll get a good setup.
Well, this is her third crack at the Breeders' Cup Distaff. I bet on her 2 years ago at 10-1. She made a big wide move at Del Mar, then she kind of flattened out late and just got beat less than a length. Andy, you picked her last year in the Breeders' Cup Distaff. She only lost by a head. She's going to be running late. There's no doubt about that. She's also going to be a higher price than my top selection. I like Idiomatic. Let's just take a look at her most recent start. It was in the Spinster, and yeah, she got loose on the lead, but this is an Amazon of a filly who, as Andy pointed out earlier, she does not necessarily have to have the lead. She rallied from behind 3 starts back. The Spinster was just a procession. She crushed. She's huge. She's fast. She's versatile. I think that Idiomatic is the horse to beat. I think she'll win if she can hold off late running Clairiere, and even Search Results, I think, is a little bit underrated by many folks. We're going to find out about the Distaff and if Idiomatic is as good as she looks, or if Clairiere can finally get it done. Third time the charm in the Breeders' Cup Distaff. Okay, let's go to the Breeders' Cup Turf. It's race number 8, 1.5 miles. And Andy, you brought this up earlier. This is a race, grass races in general, Europeans typically hold the advantage. Is that the case this year in the Breeders' Cup Turf?
I think so. I wish I could separate them. This is a really kind of a tough race, and it's really made tougher by Auguste Rodin, who it seems to wins every time except when he finishes 10th. He's in his last 5 races, he's thrown in 2 clunkers that look so bad that it looked like he should be retired, and then he came back with a great race. So Aidan O'Brien is often hard to figure. I picked Auguste Rodin. I really have no confidence in anything in this field. It's a good quality race, but and he might be the best, but this is too tough for me.
He might be the best. Mostadov might also be the best. He's the 5-2 favorite on the morning line. I went in a little different direction, and I'm shopping for a price with the horse that comes out of the most productive Breeders' Cup Turf race in history. The Arc de Triomphe has produced 10 Breeders' Cup Turf winners. 10 Breeders' Cup Turf winners made their most recent start in the Arc de Triomphe, and they didn't all win the race. In fact, most of them did not. I'm referring to number 2, Anesto, whose light campaign this year, only 3 starts, culminated last time out with a 3rd place finish in the Arc de Triomphe. He finished like a freight train. He's making only his 4th start of the season. I think he's still fresh. I think he's underexposed. He's not as accomplished as Auguste Rodin or Mostadov, but I think at 12-1, or 8-1, Anesto is worth a chance. Andy's going with Auguste Rodin, and we are going to the Breeders' Cup Classic. It's the $6 million Breeders' Cup Classic. A little bit more difficult to pick the winner than a year ago when Flightline won in a romp. Andy, this is a pretty good field. I don't see a whole lot of speed other than Arabian Night and perhaps Saudi Crown. How do you see the Breeders' Cup Classic?
I see that. I guess Arabian Night is now going to be the favorite, even though from the figure standpoint, he's just a little shaky. In my view, the favorite in this race is Ushba Tesoro. I think one of the main facts of life that anybody handicapping this Breeders' Cup card has to reckon with is that Japanese horses have become, the power on the world stage. I mean, they won the biggest money races in the world, and in Dubai and Saudi Arabia. I mean, 2 years ago, two impossible looking horses won at the Breeders' Cup. And you look at Ushba Tesoro's record. I mean, it's hard to knock it. I mean, he's won six in a row. He's earned $9 million. He won the Dubai World Cup. He's a very good horse, and their trainers clearly know how to get them ready and get them adapted to far-flung environments. I mean, I guess going to Dubai is just kind of nothing for them. The other Euro in this race, Derma Sotogake was my enthusiastic pick in the Kentucky Derby, and he just had a brutal trip, and I was hoping for a chance to recoup some of my money the next time he ran. But unfortunately, he suffered a foot injury that caused him to miss his intended prep race for the Breeders' Cup Classic. And I just can't take a horse coming off a layoff from the Derby to the Breeders' Cup. I don't think we'll ever see that be done in our lifetime. But I respect this horse a lot, and I give a look now to any any horse in this country who's coming in from Japan. I mean,
well, I want to remind you, Andy, that Derma Sotogake is listed at 20-1, and you're going to get every bit of that price if you wanted to just have a little small saver bet on him.
All right, I will not forget that.
Let me ask you about the high figure horse in the race. I kind of expected you to at least consider White Abarrio.
He would be my exacta horse. I mean, to me, that's that is the race. Ushba and White Abarrio. I mean, his two races since Rick Dutrow took him over are both big. And I can't knock him. I was amazed, before Arcangelo's being scratched, that Arcangelo was listed as the favorite in the race. The U.S. handicappers seem to be ignoring White Abarrio, but he's tough.
He's tough, he's fast, and having watched him train in person over the past week at Santa Anita, I can tell you that he is doing fantastic. He will run his race. Whether he gets 1 1/4 or not, who knows? But he will run his race. White Abarrio will. And by the way, Ushba Tesoro had some gait issues on Monday morning. Those seem to be at least somewhat resolved as of Wednesday morning. He went back to the gate. He was a lot better behaved at the starting gate. So if you read about those problems early this week with Ushba Tesoro in the gate, they seem to have worked out, at least as of Wednesday. Andy likes Ushba Tesoro, trying to become the first Dubai World Cup winner to win the Breeders' Cup Classic. I found that astonishing. There have been several Breeders' Cup Classic winners who have won the Dubai World Cup, but never the other way around. And we've had some very good horses win in Dubai and fall short in the Breeders' Cup. Cigar, Silver Charm, Curlin, California Chrome, and Arrogate all come to mind. It's not an easy double to accomplish, Dubai World Cup and Breeders' Cup Classic. Maybe Ushba Tesoro will be the first one to do it. We have two more races to talk about on Breeders' Cup Saturday. The Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. That's another 5 furlong scramble. Andy, do you like anybody in this race?
No.
Neither do I.
I looked at it in great depth, and I just have to say, I have no clue. I picked Big Invasion, but I'll leave this one to you, Brad.
Well, thanks a lot for that. I don't want it. I had a lot of trouble in this race as well. I picked a horse who I know he's going to fire, and he's probably going to be having to rally from far back. It's the local horse Notorious. If anybody can work out a trip, it's Flavien Prat, who, in my opinion, he has to be among the top 3 jockeys in the country. He's fantastic at working out a trip from behind. And he doesn't really have a flaw. Pratt doesn't. Notorious, he's proven at the distance. Can you win a 5 furlong turf sprint from as far back as he's going to come? Yeah, you can. There have only, in the last 2 years, there have only been 7 turf sprints at 5 furlongs with the rails down. 4 of them were won by horses rallying from the back half of the field. So I think that the closing style of Notorious is something that you have to be concerned with, because he could encounter traffic, but it can be done. I like Notorious. I picked Notorious. Andy picked Big Invasion. Neither one of us has a whole lot of conviction with regards to our selections, but I dare say that the Breeders' Cup Sprint, which is the final of 14 Breeders' Cup races, Andy, we all know who the best sprinter is in the country. It might be the same one from last year. Would you agree with regards to elite power?
It certainly looks that way. I mean, Elite Power and Gunite were at Saratoga this summer. I mean, they had a couple battles. I mean, I respect Gunite too, but just the way the trips developed, and you were left with the impression that Elite Power is number 1.
Well, he's 8 for 12 in his career. He's the favorite on the morning line. And if he runs his best race, he's simply faster than the others. Maybe I'm letting my, California homerism show up, but I think that Dr. Shivel and Speedboat Beach, who, in my opinion, are the only 2 true speed horses in the Breeders' Cup Sprint, unless they go head and head and cancel each other out, I think that California could run 1-2 in this race. Dr. Shivel lost this race by a zop 2 years ago at Del Mar. He's back in form. He ran very well in his prep race, and so did Speedboat Beach, who had a little bit of a wide trip, finishing second, and has trained magnificently since then. I went with Dr. Shivel and Speedboat Beach 1-2. I'll be using them both. I have respect for Elite Power, and I wouldn't talk anybody off of Elite Power. Before we get to the Q&A section, Andy, most probable winner of Breeders' Cup 2023, it might be the filly on the rail in the sprint.
Yep. Good Night Olive, I guess, would be the solidest looking favorite on the card.
Andy loves Goodnight Olive and hates my selection, Society. How about a long shot to maybe, that's not as higher than 2-1?
Well, if I can get better than 10-1 on Gina Romantica, which I expect to do, I mean, when I can get a price like that on a top figure, I got to take a shot.
You got to go with Gina Romantica in the Breeders' Cup Mile. My most probable winner is not even the morning line favorite. It's Zozos, wire to wire in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. My best long shot is Lumiere Rock in the Filly Mare Turf. She's going to get a forwardly placed trip behind in Italian, and I think she'll get first crack at the pace setter. Okay, it's time for some Q&A. So let's go ahead and take a look at the questions. How successful have European turf horses been at Santa Anita compared to the Kentucky tracks? I don't have the stats right in front of me, but as far as I know, Andy, European grass horses can win at Santa Anita, at Del Mar, at Kentucky. I don't really think it matters where the locale is. Would you agree?
No, I agree. I mean, generally you respect them all over here.
You have to, and that doesn't matter whether it's Santa Anita or Kentucky. So you just blanket respect for European grass horses. Next question. What is Ushba Tessero's running style, and will other jockeys pay extra attention to him? Andy, you like this horse. You picked him.
I did. I watched his last, the video of his last race, and he had like kind of a stalking trip behind the 2 leaders. So I guess we can say from that he's not a one-dimensional type. I have no idea what the other jockeys might be thinking about with him. There are plenty of others to worry about in that race.
Ushba Tessero is not the only contender in the Breeders' Cup Classic. I think the jockeys are going to be riding their own race. They'll be cognizant of the speed, which is likely to be set by Saudi Crown and or Arabian Night. But how about fair odds on Ushba? He's listed at 4-1. Is that about as low as you'd want to go? Or
yeah, I think that's probably a fair estimate. But as I say, if I were saying like who's the odds aside, who's the horse to beat? I just think he's got the best credentials.
Next question. For the entire what percentage of your bankroll will be for exotics and what percentage for win bets? Well, I mean, it all kind of depends. Andy talked about how he likes Gina Romanica at 12-1. I don't think that if he gets 12-1, you're going to be fooling around too much with exotics, right? So I think it depends, at least in my case, it depends on the prices that I get with regards to the horses that I like. So I don't go in with any pre-planned idea.
Exactly. I mean, there are plenty of days when 100% of my action will be in exotics. But if there's a horse that I really have an opinion on, or, I say just a decent conviction, and who's going off in double digits, I mean, nobody should put themselves in the position of hitting themselves, in the head, when a long-priced horse they like wins and they don't have anything on them. So you got to make a win bet there. But I don't live or die with win bets most of the time.
I totally agree. Spoken like somebody who may have made that mistake once or twice. I know that I certainly
haven't we all.
Next question. Is there a specific post position to stay away from at Santa Anita? I don't think so. I really think that post position is often one of the most overemphasized factors in racing. Andy picked Goodnight Olive from the rail in the Filly Mare Sprint. That's probably not going to get her beat if she does get beat. The outside post at a mile on turf. Oh, everybody goes up in arms. You look over recent history, Caraconte won from post 14. Lure won from the parking lot. Six Perfections drew far outside. There have been a number of horses win from bad posts. I think a good horse can overcome the draw. What do you think, Andy?
I hear more horse players and handicappers, nowadays, talking about, like when a horse has post position one in a sprint. Oh, how are they going to work out a trip from there? You look at the post position stats at almost any track. Post one in sprints is fine.
Yes, I agree.
It's become a pervasive myth, but I'm not going to let the post scare me off.
I completely agree. I should at least admit that I did allow, perhaps mistakenly so, I did allow post position to influence my interpretation of the Filly Mare Dirt Sprint, and I could be flat wrong because, Andy, you're right. Over time, the stats all even out. Best horses generally do win. Next question. How are Beyer figures effective going from turf to dirt or dirt to turf, Andy?
Well, they're not necessarily relevant is the answer. Turf and dirt are two different games. Maybe you'll find the occasional horse who runs pretty much the same on each, but there can be a 20-point difference in a horse's capability from one surface to another, and so it's if I'm handicapping a turf race, I'm just looking at the horse's established turf form, and the dirt form is not necessarily relevant.
I agree. Next question. Why do people say Santa Anita doesn't favor closers? Well, probably because it does not. Dirt racing overall, as a general principle, rewards horses with speed. You get out there, you run fast, and you try to make it to the wire. and it happens at Santa Anita, at Keeneland, at Gulfstream, at Belmont. Dirt racing is generally dominated by speed. That's why people say Santa Anita doesn't favor closers, because it doesn't. Next question.
Yeah.
How important is it for a horse to change leads? Well, I think it's very important. And there's two examples of horses running in the Breeders' Cup this week. Candide, the lightly raced contender in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, she won the Alcibiades despite not changing leads. You have to think that if she does change leads, she might have been a little bit more decisive. There's a long shot running in the distaff named Leta Vida, who hasn't changed leads since her career debut in Chile. If she ever would switch leads, she would make it a lot closer, but she just doesn't do it. She switches leads in the morning. She refuses to do it in the afternoon. I believe, and so does her trainer, Ignacio Correas, believes that has compromised her performance. So it is important. The question is, can you really quantify it? That's a lot more difficult challenge. Is that the last of the questions? I believe it is. And if so, that is a wrap for the Daily Racing Form Breeders' Cup webinar. Andy Beyer likes Goodnight Olive to win the Filly Mare Sprint, and Gino Romanica to possibly spring an upset in the Breeders' Cup Mile. I like Zozos to wire the dirt mile. My bomb of the weekend is Lumiere Rock in the Filly Mare Turf. Andy, thanks for joining us. For Andy Beyer, I'm Brad Free. Thank you for tuning in to Daily Racing Form. We'll see you next year.